what is missing is any serious attempt at actually documenting these culinary practices as part of a practical engineering playbook, outside of the cultural, historical, and spiritual contexts. By treating our culinary tradition as something sacred, artistic, and borderline spiritual, we are doing it a grave disservice. Let me take music as a metaphor here. Indian classical music, one of the most sophisticated artistic traditions in the world, has, I would argue, suffered from the lack of documentation and archiving. In fact, the insistence on purely oral traditions of transmission of knowledge have ended up making the art a very elitist affair, not accessible to the wider population. Western music, in contrast, has a simple visual system of notation that is able to accurately capture every nuance. Because of this, we are able to perform a Bach concerto in exactly the same way as he intended in the 18th century. As an amateur musician myself, my teachers would often tell me that Indian classical music cannot be described and documented because its nuances are beyond the ability of language to describe it with fidelity. With due respect, I think that's bullshit. What we are doing with food is rather similar. By not using the tools and language of modern science and engineering to continuously analyze and document different Indian culinary traditions and instead just writing down recipes, we are doing the food equivalent of lip-syncing to a pre-recorded track. Food, even sun-blushed, Himalayan pink salt-tossed palak chaat drizzled with organic, hand-blended coriander pesto, is ultimately chemistry. It's not always simple chemistry, I'll give you that. But then again, the physics of how the global positioning system or GPS works on your smartphone involves Einstein's general theory of relativity, something that most Silicon Valley software nerds who build these apps don't understand entirely. I want to make a strong case for understanding basic food science, minus the chemistry equations and dry academic white papers on the correlation of temperature and water absorption level in chickpeas. Chickpeas soaked in warm water absorb it faster, a trick you can use in case you forgot to soak them overnight. Cooking is essentially chemical engineering in a home laboratory known as a kitchen, with an optional lab coat known as an apron. Unfortunately, pseudoscience, amplified by WhatsApp, has given the word chemical a negative connotation. People regularly say, "I don't want to eat anything that has chemicals in it." In that case, I'd advise them to fast indefinitely. It's a cognitive fallacy, which assumes that somehow the glutamate salt in monosodium glutamate, or MSG, is a chemical, while the same glutamates inside the fleshy part of a tomato are natural. At a molecular level, they are the same thing. But more on that in Chapter 5. Understanding basic food science will make you a significantly better cook and also unlock your ability to experiment boldly without being tethered to recipes. Food science will also make for richer and more fascinating conversations with your grandmother when she teaches you how to make the perfect prawn tiyar. Knowing how pressure caramelization works, or rice to water absorption ratios, or the ability of glutamate molecules to add savoriness will help you imbibe her cooking methods and adapt it to many other dishes. I can see why this sounds daunting, considering that we live in a world buried under the collective weight of flowery adjectives used in food literature in general. Tomatoes are either sun-blushed or French-kissed. The lowly black urad dal takes on a silk root ambience in the form of Bukhara or Samarkand. And spices are always exotic and recipes handed down over the ages. Indian food writing continues to romanticize desi cooking with the same Orientalist tropes that look down on technology and promote an utterly fraudulent notion of natural and organic, continuing to perpetrate that silly idea that Indian cooking is not scientific and that those who are good cooks just know by Shuddh Desi Ghee instinct what to add and how and when. But food is ultimately just chemicals, and the process of turning a chickpea pod into a mouth-watering chana masala.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.